Welcome back to the 7th grade mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about backyard gems. Backyard gems refers to things that have been hidden around you in your neighborhood, in your state, in your region that you have been completely unaware of and that will completely astonish you and blow your mind. So in this discussion, we're not only going to talk about Nebraska and Georgia, we're going to talk about the entire United States because, there's a lot of cool stuff out there that we can go and check out. We get caught up in our day-to-day lives and we put our focus on the wrong things sometimes. So I'm going to start with a conversation about the Adena mound building culture. This culture existed starting around 1000 BC. And they were in various states across the Midwest and the North. They were in Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York. So many times the archaeologists that are looking up and discovering the information and the artifacts of the Adena people, it appears that they want to downplay their significance. But these people were involved in creating geomantic mounds that were directly related to a certain level of geometry. And these mounds are very particular, but it represents a state of mind that is difficult to understand with a modern view. So many archaeologists would say that these things are burial grounds. Those same archaeologists also say that the pyramids are burial chambers. Anybody with some sense knows that is not the case. That the pyramids were initiation chambers that would elevate you and allow you to be ready for your transition from life into death.
There are no sarcophagus inside of pyramids. Nobody wants to have that discussion. They always have these half-assed discussions. There are no sarcophagus inside. There are no tombs. There are no caskets inside of the pyramids.
Right.
They're always in the tombs,
so,
which are located other places.
Right. So speaking about the Adena, they weren't a single tribe. They were a conglomeration of tribes and cultures. So these people are building these mounds that are aligned with stars that are in conjunction with the summer equinox and the winter equinox. These people live very close to nature, and so they could read the stars and watch the movement of the sun across the sky, and they knew the significance of the celestial bodies. So if you are in any of these states that we just mentioned, go to these mounds and check them out. They will blow your mind. There's some really cool stuff that you can sit there, scratch your head and ponder like, what were these people aiming to do?
See, here's the one that people love to ignore. The ones he's talking about are like in the Northeast, New York, that area.
And Midwest.
The biggest one in the Midwest, but the biggest one in the Midwest is Monk Mound. That's the one, I think it's like in Illinois or somewhere around that. But it's actually a pyramid. It's called the largest North American pyramid. The largest pyramid north of Mesoamerica, which means north of, we talk about the Aztecs and them. But this mound is a pyramid, Monk Mound. Look it up.
But see, the reason why that we bring these cultures up, especially the Adena, is because a Eurocentric institutional educational viewpoint has always been that the people of the plains, the native peoples of this area, were not advanced in any way, that they were just warring tribes that would eat buffalo and just travel from place to place.
Yeah, they were all nomadic tribes. They had no, and that's another thing. One of the deepest things that comes up when you talk about Ivan Van Sertima, you always hear him, his accent is very thick, but he talks about codexes. The codexes are the only books that are left over from the North American Indians, are these codexes. All the other books from the North American tribes were burnt by the Catholic Church. So once you find out that these people had books and writing, because that's what they tell you, if you don't have any writing, you're not intelligent or you have no culture. You find out that these people did have writing and they did have different things, but they were intentionally destroyed. Then you find out like, okay, they were just as civilized as anybody else. This noble savage is a rumor. But what my brother Roscoe was telling you that's super deep is the fact that these things can be found where you live. You don't have to travel to Egypt to see these great things. You don't have to go outside the country or go outside to another continent to see these things. These things exist where you live right today, and that's what we're talking about, these gems, these things that are within walking distance from where you are now.
That's right. It's in your backyard, and some of these things are close enough that you can get in a car and drive 2 hours, and again, have your mind blown. and only all you're paying for is gas money. You see, but we have to get past this sedentary mentality where we're not willing to venture outside of our neighborhood, or we want to go to some far-flung place to reach some great, breathtaking view. Well, I'm here to tell you a lot of these are inside the borders of the United States, and it doesn't take a lot to get there. And especially with like quarantine lockdown and like all the travel restrictions that still remain, you can easily go and visit any of these places. And so I next want to turn your attention to now, there was a Carnival of Nations in Omaha, Nebraska in 1918. Now, we mentioned this briefly on another episode, but this Carnival of Nations, it was held at a local black church on the north side of Omaha in 1918. And so what this represents is a cultural experiment where they were bringing the cultures of the world to everybody around. They are bringing all these cultures to all the people that either have heard about it or haven't heard about it. And so I'm going to read a list of some just cool stuff that they had there. And it sounds pretty cool because growing up in your city, you tend to think that, oh, I've seen it all. I know about all the cool stuff. I've been to all the places. Well, chances are you really haven't. And you need to do some digging.
You're taking the field trips from school. You would think school, here's what frustrates you when you find out about this stuff. Like, how come nobody told me about this? Or how come this wasn't encouraged in my formal education?
Listen to this. So, Carnival of Nations at 24th and Grant, August 12th through the 19th in the year 1918. And it's going to be, they had it at two churches, the St. John AME and the Zion Baptist Church. It says, every nation will be represented by 21 persons in Oriental and antiquated garb. Japanese, Turks, Arabs, Hindus, Gypsies, Africans from the Hodenosaunee tribe, American Indians, Jews, 10 clowns, Goddess of Liberty, Uncle Sam, and King Menelik. So, King Menelik is of Ethiopia. But those of you who don't know, now, this guy probably wasn't the king of Ethiopia. He wasn't the emperor. And for those who don't know, Menelik was before Haile Selassie. So,
no, Menelik is the son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. So, of course, he wasn't alive then.
Right.
But the other thing that was very important, you said the St. John AME, that's African Methodist Church. That tells you how big the African Methodist Church was back then.
Mm-hmm. So, it says that these nations will be represented by over 200 beautiful ladies of the city. All right. All right.
I dig it. I dig it. Here we go.
I can dig it. I like what they're cooking. I smell it. But what this causes me to go and check out is like these groups that they're talking about. For example, the Goddess of Liberty. When you look up the Goddess of Liberty, you get that the Goddess of Liberty is a representative of karmic law and is the hierarch and initiator of the Lords of Karma under the solar hierarchy of Leo, testing the life streams of Earth in the quality of God, gratitude, and sensitivity and appreciation of every part of life. All right, I can dig that. But this is the thing, though. In 1918, that was probably blowing motherfuckers' minds. So I want to highlight this point because everybody thinks that all of this wellness and self-care and meditation and all this stuff started in the United States in the 70s with the beginning of the New Age movement. Well, here you go. This is proof that it's been going on long before that.
I think the biggest thing that mental health has always, I think that we used to think more about mental health back in the day. We just didn't have a name for it or it was called something else. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you get to the 80s and, oh, you're depressed, this, that, and other. And the truth of the matter is we used to care about it more back then. That's why you had people that were farmers. That's why you had people that didn't work on. People decided what they wanted to do. They worked where they wanted to work, and that was a big part of it. Now you fast forward 80s in Wall Street, and all of a sudden everybody wants to work for a corporation, and then you're not doing what you want to do. You have no choice in it, and you're a cog in the machine. I think that we recognized it in the 80s, like my brother was saying, in the 70s and 80s. But the truth was, we knew about it a lot longer, and we forgot about it. And all of a sudden, we get sucked up into this, I want to be the richest man in the world bullshit. I want to be J.P. Morgan. I want to be Rockefeller. I want to be these people, and not being the individual that you were designed to be.
There's another location in Nebraska. It's about roughly a 2-hour drive south of Omaha. You're driving 2 hours south of Omaha, and it is called the Indian Cave State Park. And this location is breathtaking because, number one, I didn't know this place existed until like a couple years ago, and it was Duct Tape was the one that told me about this. But this cave looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. Of course, like they've built a stairwell, for people, tourists to go and look at it and appreciate and all that stuff. But if you can mentally erase that from your consciousness, from your perspective, and see what this place looks like untouched, or as it existed for the cultures that existed 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago. Because if you look at the Adena, it goes right against the teachings of schools and institutions about how native peoples were supposed to be these primitives. But when you look at these places and you go to this cave, this Indian cave, and it's where's this place at? It's in, let me see. Yeah, Schubert, Nebraska. So anyway, this is some cool shit. If you want to eat some mushrooms and trip and see something really cool, go there. If you live in Omaha and you want to go trip out and have a good time, that's the place you should go. All right.
You're experiencing something that the whole point we're trying to make here is you do not have to go thousands of miles to find some amazing shit. You got amazing shit where you are, and this stuff will it connects you with Elohim. It puts you with a higher consciousness just by oh my God, this was sitting here and these people knew about this. Because like I said, the whole narrative is they're savages, or the whole narrative is they didn't have this or they didn't have that. And then you're finding out that the people that were already here were already doing stuff and doing things that are on a much higher scale and much more intelligent than we're led to believe.
So Malcolm Little was born the son of Earl Little, and he was born at University of Nebraska College of Medicine Hospital in Omaha. Malcolm Little eventually took the name Malcolm X. In the autobiography of Malcolm X, Malcolm speaks about how the Ku Klux Klan had terrorized his family because his father was involved in raising the consciousness of black people and promoting self-determination, because his father was a Garveyite. And so it's crazy because when I tell people where I'm from, I first get a smirk and I don't let that slide at all. I correct them right away. I said, hold on, brother. You need to understand the greatness I come from. Now, just because hold on, bro. Hold on. The first thing they say, like you said, is there black people from Omaha? And I'm like, yes, of course. And whenever you tell a black person from the Northeast that Malcolm X is from Omaha, they're like, oh, well, he moved to New York. Hey. We have a parade for him every year, and celebrities show up to that parade. Okay, so you can stop right there. Y'all trying to claim the motherfucker. Look, he belongs to all of us, but he is from the O. And the house that he lived in as a child is not there anymore, but the site has been preserved. So I brought up his father, Earl Little, who was a Garveyite, who was studying the ways of Marcus Garvey. This is very important to understand. So there's a context that before Malcolm was born, there was so much revolutionary groundwork that was laid by his father and the people that his father worked with and the people that even came before them, because that was in the early 1920s. Okay. Now, Earl was the Garvey Act long before then. But it's important that you understand that black people have been in Omaha for a long time, okay? Before the 1900s, going back into the late 1800s, the mid 1800s, there were black settlements in Nebraska. These settlements were naturally destroyed by small-minded Ku Klux Klan racists, but it's important that you understand that the history that you really think you know, and even for the quote-unquote woke people, or for the even older conscious people, I have had many conversations with these people that I thought that were well learned and intelligent, that didn't know nothing about the migration and the spreading of black consciousness beyond the East Coast.
Ooh.
Right.
Ooh.
Right.
I think, okay, here's a big issue. When we were kids and we would go, there's an African History Museum, a Black History Museum in Omaha that we all went to. And when you go in there, it's not very big. They didn't maintain it like they should, blah, blah, blah. We can always talk about the faults, but you saw all these black settlements and these black settlers, and then you realize how many people in Nebraska were actually from Nebraska. And this goes back to the conversations we had about Dan Calloway, and he's telling black folks were already over here. Whether you want to call them Native Americans, you were the Aborigines, whatever you want to call these black folks, we were already in the Midwest long before these states, before these lines, these territories that exist now, these principalities that exist now. We were already physically on this land. And we mentioned this on another podcast, but I just want to bring it up again. There's a beach in LA that is being returned to the black family, the black descendants of the original owners. This beach was taken. So basically these kids found out their grandparents, whatever you want to call it, owned this property, and they were the original settlers of this beach. So right now they got to pay them people the beach is worth $72 million, this area. And that's all because, like I said, we're told that we were brought here in chains. Some of us were already over here. Some of us came here on our own, or some of us were here always. And that's a very tough thing for people to swallow because that slave narrative. That's why these backyard gyms are so important, because you'll find out your place in America is not servitude. Your place in America is not a second-class citizen when you were already over here. Your ancestors were already here. And I had a talk with my dad yesterday about this shit. Back in the day, you used to be frustrated when somebody said, "No, I'm not black, I'm Indian," and you would get offended because you just don't want to be. No, it's not that. There were dark tribes already over here, and now that they've been mixed up with these descendants of slaves, all of a sudden we group them all together. But be careful by giving up your land, because that's what this is about. And it's even deeper when my brother's telling you, like, look, man, Malcolm Little, Garvey Act, there was already a rich black culture, and all those things were destroyed by the FBI and Hoover and all these other people on purpose, because we weren't the bottom of the rung. We weren't at the bottom. we were at the top, and they had to come to us. So it's really important that you recognize that these movements, these people, whatever you want to call it, Garvey, 1920s. My brother's telling you, it's always been like this. We've always been strong.
So the beach that you're talking about is a section of Manhattan Beach near Los Angeles. And a lot of people didn't realize it, but around the early 1900s, that section of the beach was owned by black people. So there was a beach resort that was on Manhattan Beach, and it was called Bruce's Beach. And there was a town of 35,000 people that was right there on that beach. And these black people, this black couple, started a vacation resort on the ocean. And, it's crazy how much mind control, Stockholm syndrome that we have, because we're taught that black people don't swim. We're taught that black people don't like going to the ocean. That's some hypocritical shit. That's mind control, my dude. Like they're trying to take away your liberty of spirit, your spiritual liberty. And if you follow those tropes, then that is on you. But this Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles is a perfect example of something that was black owned and goes against stereotypes. So stop falling for these stereotypes that make you a mental slave. You
That
know,
limit you. That they limit you. That's what they do. They put you in a box that you can't come out of. The whole idea that the white man traveled the earth before we did, that these Vikings are here, none of that. No, one of the deepest things that me and my brother talk about the Moors. But it's funny how every term that has to do with the sea is based on the word Moor, or even the ropes that hold the ship's moorings. That's because the Moors, dark people, were traveling before these Norwegians ever left the port. So when you start doing your research, you start hearing these terms like the word don't lie. The word's
dude,
telling you.
check this out. So in 1912, Willa Bruce purchased for $1,225 the first two lots along the Strand Hotel between 26th and 27th Streets. Her husband, Charles, worked as a dining car chef on a train running between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. Willa
He
ran a
was a port.
popular lodge, cafe, and a dance hall, providing black families a way to enjoy a weekend on the ocean. There you go.
Period.
So
So
her husband worked on the train. He wasn't a Pullman porter. He was a chef. So he worked on the train between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. So even as early as the early 1900s, there's black people in the Salt Lake City area. You see what I'm saying? Like,
well, see, but here's the whole thing. You'd be surprised how we need to do the research and find out how much of this land was taken from us. And the reason that's important is because right now, Salt Lake City, there's a place up there. It's worth millions. I remember, this is a crazy story. I ran across a piece of art, and one of my homeboys needed it appraised. And I spoke to a friend of mine. He said, "Look, the closest art people you're going to find is either Denver or Salt Lake City, where they have real people that can actually appraise that." And so I called the lady in Salt Lake. She called me back. She wants to see the piece. Well, of course, dealing with certain people, it fell by the wayside. Long story short, his baby's mama's mom stole this painting. She didn't steal it. When she worked for an older white lady, and before she died, the white lady gave her 3 or 4 pieces of art. So it was a real printing of this artist, and it was some craziness. But they estimated at $50,000. That's the story. And so, he came to me, and I tried to help him out. It didn't work out. But yes, this is what the whole point. Backyard gyms. You got art. You got fine art. You got stuff that belongs to you. You got stuff that belongs to your people. You got amazing landscapes that exist that are where you are. One of the things that we also talked about is Mayhew's Cabin, which is in Nebraska City, Nebraska. The Mayhew's Cabin is a site on the Underground Railroad. And also not far away is John Brown's Cave. So these are actual Underground Railroad sites in Nebraska. Now, if what you're told is that these people escaped to the north, this only happened in the southeast, way over there, and so why would there be a John Brown's Cave or a Mayhew's Cabin, which is a national recognized Underground Railroad site? Not this is official. This ain't where black folks who were going north to get away would hide in this cabin or this cave and meet the abolitionists, or hide in this cabin, wait for their next route. This is in Nebraska, which is nowhere near where you were told these stories. There's nowhere near. So this backyard gyms, something you need to go see. That if you're a black person or you're a person who wants to learn something, you need to go see this. And they were supposed to take us when we were in grade school. They never took us. That's another part. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
so I was doing some digging and I came across a photograph, and it's a photograph of Penny Park in 1955. For those who don't know, Penny Park was a amusement park in Omaha. It was a water park, and it was also a roller coaster park as well, with amusement rides. And so I guess it was built, years before that. But in 1955, it was boycotted by the NAACP for segregation. Now, in this photograph, it shows Penny Park in 1955 after it was boycotted by the NAACP. And you got black kids and white kids. Everybody in the picture is smiling. They're having a good time.
Enjoying.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I remember going to Peony Park when we were kids, and like I said, I remember it was a big deal, but now I know why. I didn't realize it was ever you can't imagine certain places being segregated. But Peony Park was this thing that everybody in Omaha used to go to. So the idea of segregation and that just is mind-boggling. I'm sorry.
Mm. Yeah. So again, it's easy for young people to have this idea like nothing happened before they were born. You know, like this stuff right here, when I come across these things, I know of it. My father used to talk about, his experiences, in Omaha when he came here from the military. And he would talk about, the north side and talk about, his experience and, everything. But then you start to get a better picture of that reality the more you start to dig and you come across news stories and articles and photographs. And then the stories that he will tell, the background would be colored in behind it. And I'm like, oh, so.
That's so deep. I remember they talked about we got like 2 or 3 Black Panthers that were still in jail. One of them died recently. And I had talked to an older Black guy about the situation. And when Roscoe tells you they fill in the blanks, it's one thing to read an article. It's another thing to talk to somebody who lived it. And they're like, oh, brother, he said, them brothers did. He said, yeah, that brother killed that cop. It's what it is, But it's so much different when you talk to somebody who experienced it because they'll tell you stuff. They'll tell you how people actually felt. Or sometimes we're on the wrong side of history, and other times it's not even what you think it is. It's like we had talked about lynchings. They have lynching museums, and me and Roscoe were talking about like we always look at lynchings from the point of view of the Klan terrorizing, but lynchings were a way of justice, and many people got lynched because they had stole horses, white, black, Mexican, whatever. And so when you find out that there's lynchings are bad, but there was also a history that, okay, look, ain't no justice. You stole this horse. These people can't supply. You're a horse thief. Hang his ass. Now, that's not a gym, but that's also something you need to understand about where you're from, who believed it, who took part. Like I said, so many times, many of the people that you care about may end up on the wrong side of history. Now, was it because the truth is not out there or, but you got to do your research. Look, I'm a big Malcolm X fan. I go to the Malcolm X birth site. That's important. They're rebuilding it, but they've been rebuilding it for like 15 years. They haven't done half the stuff they said that they would. It's real frustrating. But these are the hidden gems that are where you live right now. You need to know about them, and you need to pass them on to your kids so they can understand like, hey, what people really went through, who we were, who we are. Is not who television tells you are. So
another part of Nebraska that has natural beauty that is breathtaking is Scotts Bluff.
Yep.
Far out west in Nebraska is Scotts Bluff, and
Sydney Rock.
And when you look at these monuments, if you are a filmmaker, if you're into sci-fi, if you're a creative individual, you see these images and you are inspired. But when you go there, it elevates you to a different place mentally. Because when you look at the rock formations at Scotts Bluff, it looks like an ancient city on a hill 10,000 years ago on another planet. It's bananas.
Remember Close Encounters, and they had that big ass plateau, and the spaceship came. Yep. That's how it is. When you see that, you're like, "Holy, what is that?"
But it's like that. But then, like as you get closer to it, you start to see more and more interesting features of it. Because from afar, it's like, "Oh, that's nice," but then as you approach it, like, "Dude, this is on some other level type stuff." And it's really cool because, again, everybody thinks they have to go far away to another place in Europe or Middle East or to Africa. And I'm like, no, man, you can go in your own state. And if you're shooting like a low budget indie film, you can use that situation, that area to, shoot some stuff and then add CG, alien background behind it and fly a drone over it and record that and, add that to this footage. And you can make some crazy stuff by just going there and just doing, filming it, shooting photography, or like, filming it. It's just crazy inspirational if you're into that kind of stuff. There's another area further west that touches the Colorado border, and it's the excuse me, the Nebraska Sand Hills. So
Yeah.
the Sand Hills are really cool because, a lot of people are taught that Nebraska is just all grass and it's cornfields. Well, for one, near the river where we from in Omaha, it's not like that. There's probably more trees where we're from than more than in the rest of the state. And there's hills. There's lots of hills in the areas that we live in Omaha.
The eastern portion, yeah.
Which is why tornadoes never ripped our homes out of the ground, because tornadoes can't remain intact in a hilly area. So they'll tear up the rest of the state, but they can't mess with Omaha. Or maybe the outskirts, but not the hood. So the sand dunes and the sand hills are straight out of a movie, out of some crazy Condé Nast postcard. And you look at this stuff, dude, it's post-apocalyptic. It's Star Wars Tatooine. It's a military action thriller. It's all these things.
Road Warrior, all that shit. Yep.
All that. And for a person who possesses imagination, you could utilize that landscape and really make something intriguing. So again, the resources are all around you. I mean, there's so much that you can really utilize in your area to really, really, just take your art or your mind to another level. But another area I think we should talk about is the Ohio River Valley area. And the reason why is because there were Roman ships that were found marooned in the Ohio River Valley area. So the estimate is that they came down from the Great Lakes because they were there getting the floating copper that is in the Great Lakes in the Michigan area. And they wanted to explore, see if there was more, so they came down the Ohio River Valley area. But
one of the First Nations people up in Canada, I can't remember which tribe. That's what I just said, First Nations. But they even talk about the white man going in the caves and taking Mother Earth's bones. They're talking about copper. They were mining copper way back then. White people from Europe. There was black folks here too. We'll talk about that. We'll touch on that in a minute. But it just lets you know that people were connected for years. But like I said, forgive me for not knowing the name of that First Nations tribe. But this is Canada Great Lake area. They said pale men came and took Mother Earth's bones. They talk about it.
So, but this is what's interesting, because there's caves in the Ohio River Valley area along the river. Not only were they mining gold, but they were hiding treasure in there as well. So there's artifacts that are Phoenician, as well as Roman, as well as far into the Grand Canyon that are Egyptian. So you got to ask yourself, how are Egyptians and Romans getting over there? Well, firstly, the Roman Empire was basically, they would conquer a people and they would absorb their technology and their knowledge. And so that is what happened with the Phoenicians. Now, the Phoenicians were the transit arm of the Egyptian Empire. The Phoenicians were not strong enough to defeat the Egyptians, so they began working for the Egyptians, and they would transport things for the Pharaoh. And in transporting things for the Pharaoh would also conduct explorations into different distant lands. And
guys, you look up Phoenicians, remember, they were the purple people. They were the ones going all over the world to find purple dye. It sounds corny and crazy. It's true. Also, another article about it, if you look up Frank Joseph, he talks about this guy was spelunking in those caves, and he finds a cave that's full of these basically like selfies. They're little tablets that had pictures. Come to find out, that was a Roman secret society that came over here, and part of their initiation was to come to America, prove that you came to America, leave your artifact, and go back. And this happened several times. When you find it's like 1,200 or 2,500 little clay tablets that had pictures on them. So every time a person made that pilgrimage to prove they made that pilgrimage to this promised land, that's what they would do. So yeah, that's the whole idea that people came over during Columbus. No, we were already exploring this. These worlds were already connected. People were coming to Turtle Island long before. The other point that I was wanting to make when we were talking about Scotts Bluff is that you believe the only way you're going to see this beautiful landscape is in, like you said, the Colorado Valley, the Grand Canyon, and stuff like. There are many Grand Canyons all over. You hear about Denali State Park. You hear about these different places. They have places where you live that are amazing to look at and will connect you. And all they're going to do is make you want to go to the Grand Canyon. Of course, once you see this, like I want to see more, because that's what it's going to do. But beware of the Grand Canyon in your backyard. Beware of this amazing landscape that's near you that you can go visit, show your kids, make a weekend out of it, do that kind of stuff.
So the Phoenicians were eventually conquered by the Romans. And so in being conquered by the Romans, they usurped the Phoenicians' style of maritime knowledge. And so they took their ships, they learned how to pilot these ships, and they learned about the navigation from the Phoenicians. These Phoenicians brought them to America, and that is how they wound up in the Ohio River Valley.
We talked about this article. I can't find it, forgive me, but it's an article I read back in the 90s where, in the local newspaper, Omaha World Herald, it says Viking ship found on the banks of the Missouri River or something like that. Well, you start reading the article, it's not a Viking ship, it's a Phoenician ship. And they even in this article explore saying that at this time, the Phoenicians had been conquered by Egypt. It's a very great article. I've been looking for the archives. I can't find it. Please forgive me. If I can find this article, we will read it on the air so you guys can. But it shows that there was a very robust history of people coming to America, black people coming to America. And also, it just shows you how quick they are to whitewash the story. That when this ship is found, it actually says Viking ship. Then when they read the article, they said, nope, not a Viking ship. It's a Phoenician ship between this period of time, blah, 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 blah. So that's just, your history doesn't have to be whitewashed. You don't need Europeans to justify anything. So that's really important.
Okay. So we spoke about the Ohio River Valley, but there are actually Native American stories about giants that existed in North America. And there are several different tribes that would speak about this. When I get to this fourth one, it's going to blow your mind. The Iroquois, the Osage, the Tuscaroras, the Hurons, and the Omahas. Ladies and gentlemen, Omaha, Nebraska is named for the Omaha tribe. And that means, no, hang on. Nebraska means flat water. Omaha means the people from upstream. My neighbor was once a Native American Omaha woman. She was the daughter of a shaman, the medicine man. And when I got to know her better, when my mother passed away, she brought us some fry bread over and we had some time to talk. And we would talk about, interesting stuff. But she told me about what the word Nebraska means and how it's actually pronounced by them, Nebraska, because they don't use R's, and how Omaha means the people from upstream. But all these Native American Indians speak of giant men who once lived and roamed the territories of their forefathers. So there's also stories about combat between these native people and these giants. So they talk about these people that were like 8 feet and taller, abnormally tall. So this is where we get into Anunnaki territory, because in the Bible, it talks about how the daughters of man were then mated with the sons of God. And so this created an unholy union, which created a genetic abomination, which were the Cyclops giants.
Supposedly it's a Nephilim. That's what they talk about.
Mm-hmm. And so these abominations, they existed all throughout the earth. And there's stories about them in the Middle East. There's stories about them in Europe. There's stories about them here in North America. They're all over. But when you hear about, this is the thing. They can hide all types of stuff from you with education by using the Smithsonian. But the Smithsonian actually has...
It's more indoctrination than education. It's indoctrination.
Correct. But the Smithsonian actually has what has been rumored are skeletons of several giants. And so when you look at this, when you look at these serpent mound in Ohio, this serpent mound in Ohio, which was built by the Adena people that we spoke about earlier, under that mound, they found a 7 foot tall skeleton. And this is the serpent mound. It was found in the 1890s. It was excavated. This serpent mound, it's crazy when you look at it, but when you look at it from a topographical view, it looks like a serpent. So all of this relates to it relates to ancient things because the Nephilim, and as I said earlier, the Anunnaki were a reptile-like people. Now, one thing I found kind of strange in the newest movie about Noah and the Ark, it was a movie that was directed by Darren Aronofsky. And Noah had this snake skin that was handed to him from his grandfather and his grandfather's father. And this snake skin, he wrapped it around his arm when he was going to go into combat. And I found that very interesting. So, okay, that makes me see that this rubs up against some of this fallen angel territory and how the Anunnaki were probably involved in the world before the flood, in the time of Atlantis, in the times of Lemuria and Mu. These are things that we spoke about on previous podcasts. But have you ever noticed how whenever you talk about reptilians, reptoids, and reptoid people, how quickly people want to shut that up? How there is something that wants to keep that quiet? Have you ever considered that? Because that's something I find very strange, how people, they're afraid in a way. And they have a knee-jerk reaction to it where they just want to poo-poo it and don't even discuss it. They don't even want to talk about it.
Look, here's the thing. First things first. Everybody knows that there are conspiracy theories, things like that. But the fact that you just put the word theory on there makes it all of a sudden is mythical. It's not real. And the thing is, it shuts down any real exploration of anything that might not suit the narrative. And like I said, I told you earlier, we know for a fact that the Catholic Church had book burnings for Native American books, because the reason that's so important is that the only books that survived were the codexes. And so that tells you that there was a culture out there. So there was something in those books that the church did not want out there. They didn't want a regular person to be able to reach this. So you really need to understand that there are things out there that nobody likes to talk about, that are scary, that are uncomfortable. Now, whether you believe them or not, that's your business. I ain't telling you what to believe. I'm just trying to tell you that do some more reading, do some more research. And it's impossible to research when they burned up the books, though. It's impossible to have that culture, that knowledge, and everything had to be passed on verbally. So talk to your Native American friends.
In 1897, there was a giant skeleton that was found in Iowa. In 1933, in Steelville, Missouri, another giant skeleton was found. In Miamisburg, Ohio, Montgomery County, another one was found. And it was dated to somewhere between 1000 to 2000 BC. And this was found near a burial mound or an earth mound from these Adena cultures. In 1895, there was a San Diego giant that was found. And later on, in 1919, near Catalina Island in California, a 9-foot, 2-inch skeleton was found. It's fucking huge, dude. 9 feet. Imagine what that thing was eating all the time. Beaver Lake, the Ozark Caves in Arkansas, 1913. A 10-foot skeleton and huge skulls were found. Dude, this is crazy. There's an entire alternate history that's happening. In West, wait, this one's gonna blow you away. In West Hickory, Pennsylvania, 1870, an 18-foot skeleton was found.
Like I said, you may not believe this stuff, but this is what we mean by backyard gyms. This is stuff you can go look up yourself. The whole point of this broadcast is so that, we don't want you to question everything, but when you can go to these places on your own. They got exhibits. They got stuff that you can see for yourself. And some stuff is hidden. You might have to look for it. But some of this stuff you can find, and it's going to change the whole dynamic of the way you think. I'm not saying that you need to doubt this person or that person or the Catholic Church. We're not going there. I'm just simply saying, go see some of these things for yourself. Look them up. They got exhibits. You wouldn't believe, like when you're driving out of town, like you'll see something and you'll pull over, like, oh my God, that's the largest ball of twine. Yeah, I get it. But then they'll have like a mammoth skull behind it, or they have these things, they have these exhibits for reasons. Check them out.
So I want to talk about Atlanta for a minute. And Auburn Avenue was considered the richest Negro street in the world after Tulsa was destroyed. The richest Negro street in the world after Tulsa was destroyed. And the reason why this is because in the 1906 Atlanta race riots, black people were fed up with the violence and the hate. And so they left these areas that had white people and they moved into this area that was directly east of downtown. Now in this area, on this street, these it's like maybe five to six city blocks, but Auburn Avenue was smack in the middle of that. And on this street, so much history happened. There's a very famous church there that Dr. Martin Luther King would preach at on a regular basis. There is a nightclub that was there that Jimi Hendrix would play there. And I'm sorry, Ebenezer Baptist Church is the name of the church where Dr. Martin Luther King would preach at. There is a nightclub there where Jimi Hendrix would play guitar for several artists. He played with Curtis Mayfield, and he played with Isley Brothers, and he played with Little Richard. Little Richard fired him. And it was that drove Jimi Hendrix to go solo and start his musical career in mass, in full, and become a legend.
Don't forget this. Jimi Hendrix did not consider himself a rock guitarist.
Nope.
He considered himself a blues
guitarist.
He was a blues artist. Yes, he said he was a blues artist.
Yep. There's a whole album that is in the tone of blues, and it's Jimi Hendrix, and the album just called Blues. Yeah, there's good ones. There's good songs on there. There's Red House, Hear My Train A Comin'. See, I mean, there's so many. I can't think of the names of the other ones right now, but there's a lot of really good ones on there. But again, this happened on Auburn Avenue, though.
I think it's something that people like miss as black folks. Sometimes we miss the things that are in front of us. But so many of these churches are built on significant sites. So many of these, like, we talk about the Moorish temples and some of the things in we're talking about 1912 or 19 whatever. You'd be surprised that these things are on specific special sites, and we miss that because, of course, lack of knowledge or understanding. But many of these things are built on significant places. And so, that power is different. These Native Americans are telling you this is a sacred place, or not in Omaha, but across the river in Council Bluffs. The name is Council Bluffs. They literally had council in these big hills. So, like I said, we drive to Council Bluffs, don't realize it, but if you look at it, it's some beautiful scenery over there. It's some amazing stuff.
It used to blow my mind as a kid.
Yep.
So one other thing I wanted to say about our Auburn Avenue. Martin Luther King was born on Auburn Avenue, and he lived there all the way through his college years. He left after college and came back to Atlanta as an adult. But it was the opening of the national office of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference there on Auburn Avenue, which helped to galvanize support for Dr. King and the civil rights cause that he was involved in. But all these things were on Auburn Avenue. You had black banks. You had the Green Book hotels, where black people couldn't stay in regular hotels at the time, but you had black hotels where they could stay. Now, in Omaha, you also had Green Book hotels. So, again, there was this culture that supported black people all throughout our history on this planet in America. And, again, there's an underground railroad. There are hotels you can stay in. There's hospitals. There's all kind of stuff for black people because we had to create these things out of dealing with racism.
Necessity. It was a necessity. We had to.
Yep, no doubt. And then, so also in Georgia, there are the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, so the Georgia Guidestones are up near the South Carolina border, right below Lake Hartwell, about maybe 10 minutes south of Newburgh, Georgia, on Highway 77. It was built in 1980. And it's very, very weird because what this represents is an Illuminati sensibility. Because one slab stands in the center with four arranged around it, and a capstone lies on top of the five slabs, which are astronomically aligned. Now, here's the deal though. So these guide stones, there's a message containing a set of 10 guidelines or principles and engraved on the Georgia guide stones in 8 different languages. One language on each face of the 4 large upright stones moving clockwise around the structure from due north. These languages are English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. Now, these are the 10 guidelines. Check this out. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely. Improve fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a living new language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Protect people and nations with their fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. So those are the 10 guidelines that are on these guide stones. But the first one is, number 1, to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So wait a minute. You're saying you're going to get rid of people, eliminate the population that exceeds 500 million? What are you really saying there? Is that something that you really seek to do? Because that sounds like a globalist mentality. You still there?
The whole issue with that situation is that we read this and nobody can tell you who put them there. They don't know why. Everybody sits and like, okay, you could dismiss it, but still, that is who does that much work? Who put that much into something that no one wants to? You don't put that much work if it's not legitimate, if it's not something that's.
But check this out: the person whose name is a pseudonym, R.C. Christian, approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company on behalf of a quote unquote small group of loyal Americans. There are many rumors here in Georgia that R.C. Christian is Ted Turner, because Ted Turner has always touted that he wants humanity to be curtailed. The population of the earth needs to be curtailed so that there will be fewer people. Well, he's a person that has enough money to do something like this.
But still, look, these are the things that are all around us that are showing you that there's more to this world, whether it's good or bad, but it's more to than what you understand it to be.
No doubt. No doubt. So, again, there are other things that come to mind, but I mean, when you think about how there have been human beings in North America much longer than you realize, it's incredible. When you talk about the Moors that were here before the American Revolution and were involved instrumentally in the American Revolution, and how the first few presidents were actually black, and how George Washington is reported to have 2 Moors following him around at all times.
Everywhere.
Because the reason for that is George Washington was a Mason. And the Masons would often study Oriental cultures of the East. And when they came across the Moors, they were fascinated, and they respect their knowledge and wisdom. And so that's why George Washington kept these Moors with him at all times, at his side at all times. So, again, so here's the thing. What we have is a picture that we're putting together. So Moors have been in America for a long time. There have been First Nation peoples here much longer than we've been told they've been here. So before they had horses, they were here. Because we
But
always
remember,
hear
horses were imported from Spain.
from Spain.
Yeah, horses weren't here already.
Right. And so therefore, they make you think that there's just a bunch of red skinned hippies just walking around with, loincloths and living in teepees and they're not doing nothing at all. That's some Eurocentric bullshit. That mindset is mad Eurocentric. And it's time to combat that with truth. And so what we're getting from this picture is that the Adena culture is a glaring example of the original man that was here as early as 1000 BC, that were in contact with giants, that were in contact with the Nephilim. Okay? So you have all this going on simultaneously while Egypt. So you had the Adena people that were active while Egypt was still strong in Africa.
If you need proof of this, look up Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Yeah, I remember.
It was a book called They Came Before Columbus.
Before Columbus, yes. But one of the things they talk about is, and we talk about it on other podcasts, is that the native culture already had a word for stars. But 25 of the words for different constellations were the same as African cultures, as Egyptian. So how could they have these same words over here if they did not have contact? How come they had paper? Because they had contact with Egyptians. So nobody wants to, explain it to you. They just, that's an aberration. No, this was a culture that was respected by other cultures that were over in Africa, that were over in Europe, that were over in Asia, long before this Catholic Church would ever decide not to acknowledge them in their proper light.
I think for people that want to learn more about the ancient African influence is in America, that you really should read They Came Before Columbus, because you'll hear about the Olmecs and how the Olmecs brought their culture to the indigenous people of the Yucatan Peninsula. And in this book, they talk about the pre-Columbian America and how ships came from Mali. So that was 200 or 150 years before slavery even started, that ships came from Mali. So the crazy part is there's a sea expedition of a Mandingo king in 1311. You see about this? You hear about these fantastic things that actually happen, but they want to keep these things quiet.
Look, if you ever want to, the easiest way to find this, we all know who Mansa Musa is, right? We talk Mansa Musa, the richest man ever lived. Find out what happened to his older brother who abdicated the throne. His older brother came to America, said it was more gold over here. That's why he came over here to South America, North America. When I say America, I mean the Americas, excuse me. So when you realize that they have books in West Africa explaining about this place long before, when you realize they have Chinese ships coming over here long before you thought, when they talk to those Hajis over in India and they describe the coast over here in depth, then you realize that these cultures had already been mixing and coming and going as they pleased. It wasn't just some guy named Christopher Columbus who was looking for slaves and gold. No, the world had already came over here and met us and left, came back, whatever you want to call it. But these are the things that you find and learn when you explore these backyard gyms. That what you learned in that history book is some bullshit. They were just trying to get you to go to work. I'm going to
give you another example. There's a book called 1421, The Year China Discovered America. And in that book, it talks about how there were these great Chinese fleets that were built. And these boats were larger than the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Bigger. They said they were 3 to 4 times bigger than these ships. And they sailed from China to the west coast of America. And they made contact with indigenous people. They sailed to Africa. And they traded with African people there. They traded with people everywhere. But most importantly, they came to the United States. And when you start to dig, you find out about these things. You start to realize that the narrative that you've been taught is bogus. But see, that's the whole thing. You have to dig to find it because they're not going to give it to you. Stop waiting for it to pop up on the news. The same way people keep waiting for disclosure about extraterrestrials to pop up on the news. Sure, they talked about the Tic Tac incident in 2004. but they didn't release it until 13 years later. See? So that's again them putting a chokehold on the truth because their old adage is you can't handle the truth. No, you can't handle us getting the truth. That's the problem. And so therefore, I say to you, dig, dig, dig in your backyard, in your neighborhood, in your state, in your region, all over America, because there you will find some true, sparkling, iridescent, magnificent backyard gems.
This is for everybody. This ain't just for black folks, but stop looking for permission to be great. Stop looking for some justification that will not come. You know, when you step out and explore on your own, you'll find out that it's an amazing world and that you have a right to be in it, and you have a place that may not be defined by the people around you, may be defined by your own heart and your own knowledge. And when you step on your ancestral land, who knows what might happen with you?
Yeah. So
it's higher than any high.
That's right.
Do that shit.
Do the work. Do the work. Dig it up. Find them gems. We out. Peace.
Holla back.